And then our last balance change, maybe ever, is going to be for Hisako. So let's talk about it.
There's no reason Keats would have said that, right? Unless they're done.
Killer Instinct 2013 is arguably one of the best fighting games of all time. It didn't only give a new life and spark to an iconic and legendary franchise that was finally making a comeback, but it also changed the business and the fighting game industry forever, and for the good and benefit of us, the consumers, because of Rollback Netcode. Thanks to games like KI and also Schoolgirls, for example, Rollback Netcode started to become a basic feature that all fighting games need to have to succeed, and it basically gave us, the players, a better experience overall in any other modern fighting game. So the influence of KI and this basic quality of life feature that makes all fighting games better was very big. KI, alongside other IPs also like Mortal Kombat, had a ton of impact in the usage of seasonal DLC, which is basically the system that most modern fighting games use to sell their new characters. So if KI was so influential and so relevant for modern fighting games, why is no one working on a sequel for this game? And why is this IP so absent on the market?
If Killer Instinct was so popular that everybody loved it, why did it die? That's a great question. It's honestly a really good question because it just was done.
The first point that we need to understand about why KI has not came back again is basically who owns the game nowadays, who is the owner of the IP. And it is Microsoft, one of the biggest corporations in the world. And even though Microsoft has a huge gaming division with Xbox, it's still not enough to make KI come back. But why is that exactly? Why has Microsoft not put a couple of bucks, some money of their billionaire franchise into KI to make a new game? The reasoning, and logic behind why KI has not made a comeback again is very simple actually. Microsoft of course owns KI. But Microsoft and the Xbox division also own other video games. And what is the goal of a company? To earn money, to profit. And with what do you think you're gonna profit more? With a new KI or with a spin-off for Call of Duty, Halo, Minecraft, Diablo, Age of Empires, Gears of War, Tony Hawk, Forza, Wolfenstein? The amount of video game IPs that Microsoft and Xbox owns is astronomical. And in the list, of profit possibilities, KI is probably at the end. So why would you put the investment on a fighting game like KI if it's not gonna give you an immense profit, like for example, making a new Halo or a new Call of Duty? So in that sense, KI is kind of trapped, on a hell because Microsoft owns it. It would be a much better thing if KI was owned by a smaller company. So as I said before, KI is basically trapped in hell because it is owned by a company that is never gonna put it as a priority because they have other video games IPs that are basically gonna make them a lot more money than what KI could even dream of. So KI would be much better if it was owned by a different company, like for example, NRS, or maybe even Arc System Works, or even Bandai Namco could make some work with KI even better than Microsoft. So in that sense, it is very hard to see a future in which KI is going to have a new game because there is no context in which Microsoft is going to put the investment on an IP like KI and think, oh, a new KI is gonna make me more money than my new Call of Duty, than my new World of Warcraft, than my new Diablo, or than my new, even Age of Empires, So it is a very tough moment for KI as a franchise because it is on a very bad spot when it comes to ownership. And ownership is not the only challenge, there's also the problem of who is going to develop the new KI if we ever make one. The only context I see in which KI comes back is basically if Microsoft and the Xbox division say like, okay, we want to make a new KI, but we're going to externalize the development of the game completely. We're not gonna make it, on the house. Everything is going to be done outside of here. We're gonna pay someone to do it, and we just take the profit, and that's it. And we make a good deal. That is the only context in which I would see KI coming back. So which developer could basically get the work done and Microsoft externalize the construction of a new KI to them? I think that there is a couple of developers that could do it well, but it is still a very hard thing to do and a big challenge because you need a developer that has fighting game experience, or everyone is going to have to learn how to make a fighting game and it's going to be a mess and things are probably gonna go very bad and they're gonna become expensive, which is something that Microsoft of course does not want. If you make a new KI because it is the type of game that doesn't give you insane profit, you probably want to have very tight money and budget for a game like it. So which options do we have in terms of developers to make a new KI? I would say that they are very limited, but still they are present. So which are the best options to basically externalize the process of developing a new KI, in which Xbox and Microsoft can say, okay, we are gonna give you this IP, make us a new game, and we just make a good deal and we earn some money with it. The first option, of course, would be Double Helix. It doesn't exist anymore. You know, Double Helix was bought by Amazon Games, if I'm not mistaken, and Amazon Games is probably not gonna make a new KI. That is probably not happening. Then we have Iron Galaxy. They could make a new KI. Iron Galaxy knows how to make fighting games, but if I'm not mistaken, they are currently working on other games, and even though they have said publicly that they would like to work on KI again, it is probably not their priority right now. So if Iron Galaxy ever works on a KI, it's probably gonna be, you know, some years from now. And then we have, you know, wildcards, basically developers that could make a KI, but they are probably not gonna make it, because the most realistic one is probably Iron Galaxy, and those are Arc System Works. You know, Arc System Works could make a KI. I think that they would make a good job. Arc System does very good fighting games, and if you give Arc System, you know, a good IP, they have already showed that they can make an amazing game, like what happened with Dragon Ball FighterZ. So the only thing is, of course, that Arc System is basically a Japanese developer, so maybe the aesthetic of the game would not be that connected to the older, you know, style that KI has always have. So that would be kind of weird. Maybe the other option is NRS, you know, the ones with MK, Injustice. That would make sense, you know, because the aesthetic of those games is kind of similar to the one that Killer Instinct has, but I do not want to see a KI with the gameplay that MK has, the gameplay that MK1 and MK11 have, which is absolutely atrocious. Is one of the most boring fighting game gameplay loops that you have out there. At least for me, they are very slow, very rigid. Like, if KI was played like that, it would be absolutely disgusting. So hopefully NRS, if they ever make a KI, they don't follow the philosophy of gameplay that they have for Mortal Kombat at the moment. Okay, it would be very bad. The other options that you have are bigger developers, you know, like Bandai and stuff like that. But is that really gonna happen? Is Capcom gonna make a KI? No. So the realistic options are Iron Galaxy and maybe, just maybe, NRS and Arc System Works. I think that those are the only real options. Now, is that going to happen? Probably not. Okay, it would be very weird if any of those devs started making a new KI. The only one that could make a new KI, I would say, and is a little realistic, is Iron Galaxy. So we have double trouble, basically, you know. We have problems with who owns the game. It makes the game be trapped on hell, and it's hard to develop a new game when it is not your priority in terms of financials, basically. And we also have developer problems. You know, we don't have a company that can make the game, you know, on a budget and basically make the best game possible that is not Iron Galaxy. It's like the only option. So that makes it harder, because you only have a specific company that can make the game for you and make it work. So is KI ever gonna come back? I don't know. We really don't know what's gonna happen with KI. We just have to hope that KI can come back at some point, but I gotta say that if Microsoft is still the owner of KI, you know, from now to 10 years after, I think that KI still would not have a new game. So sadly, maybe KI is not gonna come back for a long time. We just have to pray and see what happens with the game. Hopefully, it makes a comeback at some point. So, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing, and leave a comment. Do you think that KI is ever going to come back? And see you on the next video, guys.